Welcome to our channel. Here, we learn new ideas and improve our English at the same time through stories. You practice English without feeling like you're studying. So let us start. Genghis Khan is one of those names that people hear and instantly think of conquest, fear, and pure destruction. More than 800 years ago, he built the most powerful fighting force the world had ever seen, and used it to create the largest land empire in history. A lot of conquerors get compared to him, but when it comes to sheer scale, very few even come close. What makes his story even more remarkable is where it began. Because he did not start life in a palace or even in anything close to comfort. He started in one of the harshest places on earth. Most of what we know about his early life comes from a source called The Secret History of the Mongols, written not long after his death. According to that account, the boy who would become Genghis Khan was born around 1165 on the steppes of Central Asia. His birth name was Temujin. It is said that he was born holding a clot of blood in his hand, which people took as a sign that he was destined for greatness. Or, at the very least, a sign that this was not going to be a very ordinary baby. The world he entered was brutal from the beginning. The Mongol tribes were scattered across the steppe, divided into clans that were constantly fighting one another. There was no single ruler holding them together. The land itself was hard and unforgiving, with open plains, rocky ground, freezing winters, and very little comfort anywhere. This was not the kind of place where people got soft. If you survived here, you learned to ride, hunt, fight, and endure. Temujin grew up in a nomadic society, always on the move, as the clans searched for fresh grazing land for their animals. His father had 2 wives, which was normal in that world, and his mother herself had been taken from another tribe before marrying into his family. So even in his own household, power and force were part of everyday life. He grew up with brothers, a sister, and half-brothers, and from a young age he learned the skills that mattered most on the steppe: horsemanship, hunting, and toughness. As a boy, Temujin was said to be brave and capable, but also quiet and inward-looking. He was not the cheerful, easygoing type. He preferred to think for himself, and even early on, he seems to have had a strong sense that he was meant for something bigger. That is easy to say after someone becomes famous, of course, but in his case, people around him really did seem to notice that he carried himself differently. When he was around 9 years old, his family arranged a marriage for him, which was the custom. The girl's name was Borte, and she came from a neighboring tribe. Temujin was taken to live near her people so the two could grow up with a marriage already planned. But on the way home from leaving his son there, Temujin's father met a group of Tatars, longtime enemies of his people. They appeared friendly and offered him food and drink. It was poisoned. He died 3 days later. That one event changed everything. With Temujin's father gone, the family lost its protection and status. The clan that had once followed his father abandoned the household and left them to survive on their own. In a place like the Mongol steppe, that was almost a death sentence. Temujin's mother now had to hold the family together, and life became desperate. Food was scarce, tensions were high, and the struggle to survive got uglier. At one point, when Temujin was about 13, one of his half-brothers took a fish he had caught. That may sound like a small thing, but when people are living at the edge of survival, small things are not really small. Temujin responded by drawing his bow and killing him. That was a shocking act, even in a violent world. But it also revealed something important about him very early. He could be absolutely ruthless, even toward his own family, and once he decided to act, he did not hesitate. By the time he reached his mid-teens, Temujin had become physically strong and clearly stood out among his brothers. They started treating him like a natural leader, but other people noticed too. The clan that had abandoned his family began to fear that this young man might one day rise against them. So, they made the first move. They attacked, captured him, and put a heavy wooden yoke around his neck like a prisoner. For most people, that might have been the end of the story. For Temujin, it was the beginning of his legend. He managed to escape once, was caught again, then later used a mixture of force, bluff, and nerve to get free for good. At one point, he threatened a guard into helping him by saying he would accuse the man of assisting his escape unless he was released properly. It was clever, cold, and very effective. Even as a teenager, he was already showing the kind of mind that would later terrify whole kingdoms. He was not just brave, he was calculating. By around 16, Temujin returned to Borte's people and married her. As a wedding gift, her father gave him a valuable sable coat. Temujin did something very smart with it. Instead of simply keeping it, he gave it to a powerful local leader named Togrul in order to build an alliance. That one move says a lot about him. He understood that power did not come only from strength. It also came from relationships, strategy, and knowing when to trade a gift for future support. He was still very young, but already he was thinking bigger than survival. After marrying Borte and securing support from the powerful leader Togrul, Temujin began doing something far more important than just rebuilding his family's position. He started building influence. At first, that meant winning back people who had abandoned his household after his father's death. But before he could fully enjoy this first rise in power, disaster hit again. A group called the Merkits attacked his camp and kidnapped Borte. For Temujin, this was deeply personal, but it was also political. In the world of the steppe, losing your wife in a raid was not just a private tragedy. It was a blow to your honor, your status, and your ability to lead. So he moved quickly. He rode to Togrul and asked for help. Togrul agreed, and together with another important ally, Temujin gathered a force of thousands of warriors. The rescue raid was savage and effective. The attacking force stormed the Merkit camp, killing, looting, and smashing through it with overwhelming force. In the middle of the chaos, Borte was found and brought back. But she had been raped during her captivity and soon gave birth to a son. It was never fully known whether the child was Temujin's or one of the Merkits. Temujin accepted the boy anyway, which was practical, but it also left a shadow over his family that would matter later when questions of inheritance came up. At around this same time, Temujin grew close to a man named Jamuka, who had been his childhood friend. The two became what was known as Anda, or blood brothers. This was a very serious bond in Mongol culture, almost like swearing brotherhood for life. They lived together, ate together, and for a while, it looked as though the two men might rise side by side. But power has a way of ruining friendships, especially when both people think they should be in charge. As Temujin's following grew, so did the tension between him and Jamuka. Some of that may have come from jealousy inside Temujin's own household. Some of it came from ambition. And some of it probably came from the simple fact that two strong leaders rarely stay equal for long. At one point, while the clans were moving toward better grazing land, Jamukha invited Temujin to turn off and camp with him. Temujin ignored the invitation and kept riding. Then he looked back and saw not only his own people following him, but many of Jamukha's men as well. That was a huge moment. Temujin was no longer just a capable young warrior with loyal relatives and a few useful allies. He was becoming a magnet for followers, and in the Mongol steppe, followers meant survival, wealth, and military strength. Some joined him because they believed in him, some because they wanted protection, and some because saying no to Temujin was becoming a very dangerous choice. As his camp grew, so did the need to feed it, arm it, and reward it. That meant raids. Again and again, Temujin attacked neighboring clans, taking their animals, their goods, and often their women. He used fear very deliberately. He wanted nearby tribes to understand that resistance would be costly. In that sense, even before he ruled a huge empire, he already understood psychological warfare. He knew terror could travel faster than horses. There is a famous quote often linked to Genghis Khan about the greatest joy being to crush your enemies, take their wealth, and seize their wives and daughters. Whether the exact words come from him in that form or not, the sentiment fits the methods he was now using. He believed conquest was not just practical, it was proof of power. Still, his rise was not smooth. Jamukha, now openly his enemy, struck back. After a conflict between their followers over grazing land, violence escalated, and Jamukha launched a surprise attack on Temujin's camp. The attack was devastating. Many of Temujin's men were killed, and 70 of his captured commanders were reportedly boiled alive. It was not just defeat, it was humiliation. That defeat changed him. Temujin realized that if he wanted to become more than just another strong clan chief, he needed something no one else on the steppe had ever really created before: a disciplined, organized, highly mobile military machine. Up to that point, Mongol warfare had often been fierce but fragmented. Temujin began reshaping it into something far more dangerous. He trained his men hard. He emphasized speed, discipline, and obedience. His warriors could travel extraordinary distances in very little time, often averaging around 70 miles a day. They lived rough, moved fast, and fought with terrifying coordination. This was the beginning of the Mongol war machine that would later shock the world. His reputation started spreading beyond Mongolia itself. Even the rulers of the Jin Empire in northern China took notice. They invited him to help fight the Tatars, who had long been enemies of both the Chinese and the Mongols. Temujin accepted gladly. The Tatars had poisoned his father years earlier, so this campaign gave him both revenge and prestige. The Mongols crushed him, and when he returned, Jamukha attacked again. This time, Temujin was ready. When Jamukha attacked again, Temujin was no longer the same leader he had been before. The humiliating defeat and the murder of his commanders had forced him to rethink everything. He had learned the hard way that courage alone was not enough. Loyalty, discipline, speed, and structure mattered just as much. So when the next showdown came, his forces were far better prepared. Over a series of bloody clashes, Temujin defeated Jamukha's followers and broke much of his rival's power. Jamukha himself escaped more than once, which must have been deeply frustrating. Temujin was building a career out of winning, and Jamukha had a very annoying habit of not staying defeated. Eventually, though, Jamukha fled to the Naiman, a powerful tribe in the northwest. Temujin responded the way he usually did when someone gave him a problem. He rode straight at it with an army. His forces overwhelmed Naiman as well. This time, Jamukha's luck finally ran out. The small group sheltering him turned him over to Temujin, hoping to save themselves. What happened next is revealing. Temujin was disgusted by their betrayal and had them executed. Then he offered Jamukha a pardon. Jamukha refused and asked to die instead. Temujin granted the request, and his old blood brother was killed. Even at this late stage, there seems to have been a trace of emotion in Temujin's reaction. He reportedly turned away and did not want to watch. That does not make him soft, of course. It just reminds us that even very brutal men can have lines they feel more than others. With Jamukha gone and the Naiman beaten, Temujin now stood above the Mongol world in a way no leader had before. One by one, the remaining tribes were either persuaded, pressured, or crushed into obedience. By the early 1200s, he had brought together an enormous number of people who had once been bitter enemies. That may actually be one of his most impressive achievements. Conquest is one thing. Forcing constantly feuding tribes into a single military and political system is something else entirely. In 1206, a great assembly was held, and Temujin was given the title Genghis Khan, usually understood as something like universal ruler or great leader. This was the moment when the peasant boy from the steppe truly became the supreme ruler of the Mongols. Now came the next question. What do you do after uniting the fiercest fighting culture on earth under one banner? In Genghis Khan's case, the answer was simple. You point them outward. He had already tasted power, and he had no interest in stopping at Mongolia's borders. His dreams, his ambition, and his military machine were all pushing in the same direction. To the south, beyond the Great Wall, lay China. But before he could strike deeply into Chinese territory, there was another obstacle in the way. The kingdom of Xixia, ruled by the Tanguts. This state controlled important trade routes linking Central Asia and the wider world. Genghis attacked. Over the course of 2 years, he brought Xixia under his control. It was a strategic victory as much as a military one. With that kingdom subdued, the road into northern China opened up. Before invading the Jing Empire, Genghis first tried diplomacy. He sent envoys, hoping perhaps to secure terms or at least measure the response. The Jing authorities killed them. That was a serious mistake. For Genghis Khan, envoys were sacred. Killing them was not just an insult. It was a direct challenge that demanded revenge. According to tradition, he withdrew, fasted for several days, and then declared that heaven had granted him victory. Whether that scene happened exactly like that or not, it fits his style perfectly. He was not just a war leader. He knew how to wrap war in destiny. He invaded with around 40,000 cavalry, and what followed showed the full terrifying power of the Mongol army. They moved quickly, struck hard, and caused chaos before defenders could organize properly. Their tactics were unlike anything most settled states had faced. Mongol horsemen could appear suddenly, attack from range with deadly archery, fake retreats, circle back, and keep moving at incredible speed. Fighting them was like trying to punch smoke that also happened to be shooting arrows at your face. Their methods were also ruthless. Genghis used terror as a weapon just as much as swords or bows. In some campaigns, captives, including women and children, were forced forward as shields. Cities that resisted could be destroyed almost completely. The goal was not only victory in one place, but fear in the next 10 places before the Mongols even arrived. Within 2 years, Genghis Khan had reached Zhongdu, the Jing capital, in the area of modern Beijing. It was a huge fortified city, and his forces laid siege to it for months. Eventually, with siege engines and relentless pressure, the Mongols broke through. The city fell after immense bloodshed. This was no longer just a tribal leader winning local battles. Genghis Khan had become the conqueror of major civilizations. And after China, his attention would shift even farther west toward the Islamic world and the edge of Europe. After crushing major resistance in Mongolia and breaking into northern China, Genghis Khan returned for a time to the steppe. But by now, staying still was never going to satisfy him for long. He had united the Mongol tribes, built an army unlike anything the world had seen, and proven that even large fortified states could be beaten. So naturally, his attention moved farther west. Beyond China lay the vast Khwarezmian Empire, a powerful Islamic state stretching across much of Central Asia. Its ruler, the Shah, controlled rich cities, major trade routes, and an empire large enough to rival Genghis Khan's own growing realm. At first, Genghis did not actually seem eager to conquer it. He wanted trade, stable borders, and a working relationship, so he sent a caravan and later envoys into the Shah's territory. That should have been the beginning of diplomacy. Instead, it became the beginning of catastrophe. The Shah's officials captured and killed the men Genghis had sent. Then, another group of envoys was murdered as well. For Genghis Khan, this was one of the greatest possible insults. He believed envoys were protected absolutely. You could reject a message, threaten a ruler, even prepare for war. But killing messengers crossed a line he took very seriously. So once again, he turned to vengeance. And when Genghis Khan came for vengeance, it was rarely a small, measured affair. He launched one of the biggest campaigns of his life, leading an army said to number more than 200,000 men. The Mongols swept into the Khwarezmian Empire and unleashed years of destruction. City after city fell. Resistance was punished with horrifying brutality. Entire populations were massacred. The Shah's power collapsed under the pressure of a military force that moved with incredible speed and hit with relentless coordination. This campaign is one of the clearest examples of why Genghis Khan's name became so feared across history. He was not simply defeating enemy rulers. He was destroying systems, cities, armies, and in many cases, the people living inside them. His empire expanded from the Yellow Sea in the east all the way to the Caspian Sea in the west. That is a staggering amount of territory, especially when you remember that it had been built by a man who started out in a scattered tribal world with almost nothing. By this point, Genghis Khan was not just a steppe conqueror or a regional power. He had become the master of the largest contiguous empire the world had ever seen. Still, he knew one important thing. No empire lasts long without succession. So he named his son Ogedai as his heir. That decision would matter a great deal later, because the Mongol Empire was now so vast that keeping it together was going to be as hard as building it. But before the question of succession could fully take over, Genghis still had unfinished business. In 1226, he led yet another major campaign, this time against the Tanguts of Xixia, who had rebelled against Mongol rule. Even in his 60s, he was still riding at the head of massive armies. That says a lot about the kind of man he was. Most people at that age might start thinking about slowing down, resting, enjoying family life. Genghis Khan apparently looked around and thought, maybe one more invasion. During this campaign, he suffered a serious fall from his horse. The injury caused internal damage, and over the following months, his condition worsened. But even as his health declined, the campaign continued. That is one of the recurring themes of his life. Everything came second to conquest, even pain, even age, and eventually, even survival. On August 18th, 1227, Genghis Khan died. He died at the height of his power, ruling an empire that stretched across huge parts of Asia and had shaken the foundations of multiple civilizations. The exact location of his burial remains one of history's great mysteries, and that almost feels fitting. A man who left such a massive mark on the world also left behind one final unanswered question. After his death, the empire did not disappear. In fact, it grew even larger. His son Ogedei continued the expansion, and later his grandson Kublai Khan would extend Mongol power even further, ruling over China and helping turn the Mongol Empire into the greatest land empire in history. So in a sense, Genghis Khan did not just conquer a vast empire. He built a system and a legacy strong enough to keep conquering after he was gone. Now, when people talk about Genghis Khan, they usually focus on the horror, and honestly, that is understandable. His campaigns caused staggering death and destruction. Entire cities were wiped out. Countless people were slaughtered. He used terror as a strategy and brutality as a warning. By any normal standard, his methods were savage. But history is complicated, and so is his legacy. Because once the Mongols had conquered these enormous territories, they also created something unusual, a vast zone of relative stability across much of Asia. Trade routes became safer. Goods, ideas, technologies, and even diseases moved more freely between East and West than ever before. In that sense, the empire forged through violence also helped connect the world in a new way. It was brutal, but it was also transformative. So Genghis Khan remains one of history's strangest and most powerful contradictions. He was a destroyer, but also a unifier. A man born into hardship who rose through raw will, military genius, and astonishing cruelty. He came from a world of scattered tribes and ended by reshaping half the known world. And maybe that is why his story still grips people so strongly. Not because it is noble, and definitely not because it is gentle, but because it shows just how far one driven, relentless, terrifying human being can push history. All right, if you made it through this session today, that already says something about your discipline. This repetition and consistency combination might look boring on paper, but it is one of the most powerful ways to build fluent, natural English. Keep showing up like this, and your brain will slowly adapt. Trust the process. If this helped even a little, consider liking the video or subscribing. It lets me know these sessions are actually making a difference. We'll catch up again soon. Take care till then.